Greetings, everybody. It's Mike Yao with Savage Kingdoms role-playing game and Fire in the Head Productions. Haven't done a video in a little while, so I thought I would do one that's updating the Savage Kingdoms Heroic Adventures project that I've been working on. It seems like forever. So yeah, I just want to do a quick video, a little update video, let you guys know what's going on. So number one, it's still happening, right? I'm starting to pick up some speed now, starting to find a little extra time to do some extra writing. About to get super busy with rehearsals for an upcoming stage production, but I still should have some time during the day and other non-rehearsal moments to maybe do some more writing and more design work. So also included in this update, not only to let you know that I'm working on Savage Kingdoms Heroic Adventures, I'm probably 70, 75%. I'd say 75%. That sounds positive and probably pretty accurate. Written. So just want to add a few more things. I mean, I could probably publish it like it is, but it's a little on the lighter side. So here's what's going to be inside of the book. So during the original Kickstarter project, I think it mentions it in the Kickstarter page. If not, it's probably in one of the videos I did that we were looking at 4, possibly 5 full adventures, probably like 30 pages or whatever, 35, like a full, good size adventure with, details and everything sort of written out. So that's going to change slightly. I'm going to do 3. There were written 2.5 of them. 3 of those large adventures, and a couple of them are more than 30 pages, so they're like 40 or something like that. That one's probably more like 30. So, so there'll be 3 of those large adventures, as was mentioned at the beginning of the project. It was never set in stone, but that was kind of the thought. So now I've kind of thought over time, since I've been doing this for a while, I want to do these 3 big adventures, and then I'm going to put some smaller ones. I've kind of, over the last year or two, maybe even more than that, I've kind of gotten more into the quick start adventures. I feel like, I know when I run adventures, when I prepare adventures, I usually run it off of 1 sheet of paper, sometimes 2. I've let people know my methods, a few people, but not many. I might do a video one of these days on my methods of game mastering. I've been doing this for a while, and maybe it might help someone. And I see some other good stuff on YouTube too that helps me, and either verified stuff that I'm also been doing as well, or it's some new stuff that's really cool, and I just kind of add that into my own repertoire. But yeah, so all that's to say, since I typically kind of run adventures on a page or 2 of prep. Then I want to do some adventures but it's going to be more than that. There's not going to be 1 or 2 pages. I don't think they'll be a little bit longer than that. So, but they're going to be shorter adventures. I don't know. Maybe I'll make 1 or 2 pages now to think about. But if I do that, it'll be like 10 or 12 of them, 15 of them. Otherwise, if I do, the other thing I had in mind was more like 3 to 5 or 5 to 7 page little short adventures that you can just pick up and drop into your campaign and not super involved. You don't have to do a lot of reading and a lot of prep. They'll also be straight from the world, straight from the Savage Kingdom setting. So that stuff's already kind of done for you. But on the other hand, they'll be more skeletal, right? They'll be smaller, so each game master can add a lot more of their own flesh to the bones, as it were. So I think that's really cool. I know when I read longer adventures in other game systems or whatever, part of me is like, yeah, this is really cool and really thought out. But there's a large part of me that's like, this is like maybe a little too much. It's particularly if you already know the setting, because some of that extra stuff that's written in those long adventures covers stuff you might already know if you're familiar with that setting. It's kind of setting specific stuff, and I feel like they can kind of cut to the chase on a lot of that. So I would like to do that, and it allows the game master again to kind of flesh out more stuff, and it even allows the players more opportunities to flesh out things using improv technique and good listening and sort of feedback and incorporating what people say without saying that's what you're doing. That's another little GM trick, but so yeah, it just leaves it's more breathing room doing these smaller adventures. Another thing that's coming up in the book is several optional rules. There'll be another optional rule section. I know those are, I wouldn't say if they're popular, but I did hear some like halfway decent feedback on that chapter in the core rule book, but also the Savage East, where it just likes doing optional rules. And I personally like that when I see a game system and I buy a core rule book or a supplement for a game system. I like when they include optional rules because it means designers have been thinking about, hey, there's a different way we could be doing this, and I wanted to throw that out to you guys. Or it might be, in my case, these are rules that almost became final, and I end up going with the official ones, and so I wanted to put the optional rules, some of the optional rules in there that might have been official eventually. So yeah, it's kind of cool to see that. And then there's some of the optional rules are new things that I've just recently come up with over the last 3 months or whatever. Uh, there's a new 3 action system for Savage Kingdoms that I might put in there for you guys in the book. I'm not maybe, I don't know. I'm like 50-50 on it. So I do have it already written, but it might be being used for my own in-person Savage Kingdoms campaign with my own table, or maybe even a couple of groups, as kind of like unofficial playtesters of the 3 action system. Because changing it from, as you may or may not know, Savage Kingdoms has a 2 action combat or action system. It's not always combat, but it's usually combat. So where you have, well, 2 actions, although only one of the actions can be an attack action. And I've been mostly happy with that, not entirely happy. So I'm even looking at a 2 action system where you can make 2 attacks in the round. So let me go behind the screen. Really, I know this is kind of not really the subject, but it is. So I just, while it's on my brain, let me come up with it. So the reason for the 2 action system, the reason that I have, well, the reason for the 2 action system is nice. I don't like systems that have to break down what action types are, other than like maybe a free action or something. I don't like that there's move and then there's, I just kind of like, it almost forces you or assumes that's what you're going to do. So when you just say you have 2 actions, and they can be almost whatever except for only one attack, that means it's showing that it doesn't necessarily have to be a move. You don't have to move anywhere. You can do some other stuff with that second action, disengage or cast a spell or whatever. But the reason for the 1 attack action is that when I was designing the game in my mind and through playtesting, I didn't want people to just engage in melee combat and just have a big slugfest with like both attacks and actions being used to attack. I just thought in my head, and having play tested that a little bit as well years ago, it just seemed like it was just going to be so boring. It's going to be a slog. No one was going to use that second action for anything but to attack again. It's just super boring. Um, so the way you can make multiple attacks with the current attack action is that you have to have an ability to do that, like a talent that does it, like Ori. If you're a Chernari with a claw, a natural attack, or a Sleer with a bite attack, or whatever, then you could do it. But generally, you have to have something like pugilistic follow up, or shield bash, or dual weaponry, or ambidexterity, where you have a secondary attack, and all of that's part of the 1 action. So I'm looking at a way to possibly, with a 3 action system, you can actually make 3 attacks. They could all be, you could make 3 attacks, which sounds like more than what I was just talking about, right? The 2 attacks, how that would be kind of boring, right? But in this case, each attack takes up a slot, an action slot. I don't want to give too much away, but so for example, if you are a Chernari with pugilistic follow up, you have a spear, you can stab with a spear, elbow, headbutt, kick someone, whatever, with the pugilistic following of the brawling attack, and then do a claw attack. But those would be all 3 of your actions. So that's a way to pay. So that's like you get attacked 3 times. That's great, but that's the way to kind of pay for it. Like all of those slots are taken up, and you couldn't do anything else for that round. So again, I don't know. It might be too much. When you put it into a 3 action system instead of a 2 action system, it does. I think it kind of spreads it out a little bit more, right? Does that make any sense? Having playtest the 3 action system in Red Sun, which is a new game I'm working on, it's more of a like a traditional sword and sorcery. I used to kind of market Savage Kingdoms as, you could probably tell by the name Savage, as kind of a sword and sorcery, almost Conan-esque game. But over time, it actually really isn't really that anymore. I call it more of a Dark Ages, gritty. It's got sword and sorcery elements to it certainly, but it's not quite as their traditional sword and sorcery set more of an antiquated age, an age undreamed of, which generally represents like the Bronze Age, maybe going into the Iron Age, right? And the discovery of steel is like a new big deal kind of thing, right? The riddle of steel and all that sort of thing. Whereas Savage Kingdoms is set more in a Dark Ages or / even like early Middle Ages. Now there are a couple of cultures that are like kind of antiquated, like Lorinthia, Pridonia, that's on purpose. But they are kind of like the advanced version of that. They're even kind of going into like in some ways, an early Middle Age sort of era. But anyway, that's a little rant, but it does connect to what I'm talking about, which will be in the game, which will be in the Heroic Adventures supplement, which is the possible 3-action system. And maybe I will, if I can finally get it hashed out, maybe I'll put in the new optional 2-action system where you could possibly make 2 attacks. But I have to figure that out. I'm not so sure that's going to happen. So, what else would be in the book? So, what else is the book? Also, is encounter tables. I have encounter tables for certain regions of the known world of Savage Kingdoms. Right now, the ones I've written, designed, are from the Astagonia continent, the Western continent. And some of these tables are based on my personal tables that I've kind of created over the years that were never published. Like half of it's that of each chart and or table, and each the other half is like kind of brand new stuff that I've just tweaked and brainstormed. But they're kind of simple. It's a D20 roll. Going off the D20 system because Savage Kingdoms uses only a D20, doesn't use any other type of dice, and I like that. Like to keep that thematically all the way through there. I thought about doing 2d20 because that way you get a bell curve in the middle, but instead I'm just going to do 1d20, and then things that are more common have like 2 or 3 chances. It's like double the chances instead of the single chance. You'll see. So there's some encounter tables for, so far I have like Malovia, Brythia, Laurenthian Empire, Scathia, I think, Norland, Eridorn, Ismondos, and so now I need to put a Pridonian one in there. I think that's Malovia, Scathia. And then I'll probably, I don't know if I can do all the eastern regions. That seems like it's a bit much, but I'll hit some of the major ones like the Zarmese Empire, which is a pretty large area, and the Sea of Sand area. Probably maybe Volnarok or Ticonara, something like that. And then certainly at least one encounter table for Imanju, the sort of southern continent. At least one for that, maybe a couple even, but we'll see. So that's what's in store. Other things that might be in the book, let's see, optional rules, encounter tables, the mini adventures, the 3 big adventures. I might even have some other cool little stuff in there called, like I might do some language stuff. I have actually come up with some words for the different languages of the world. Again, I try to make the setting pretty realistic. A lot of people said there is a historical fantasy feel to Savage Kingdoms. That is actually on purpose. I'm a huge fan of historical fantasy, particularly grounded fantasy. So I love historical fantasy that has a little dash of fantasy or a mystical element, because it's not that far-fetched, because our ancestors back in that actual time, that some of these fantasy worlds are somewhat emulating, there was some mystical thing, or at least so they thought. For all we know, maybe some of those spell rituals actually did have some power to them back then. Now, magic has power as long as you let it have power. A lot of it is in the mind, and but anyway, that's a whole different thing. So I'm not sure why I got on that. So anyway, the reason I got on that was because it does have a historical fantasy feel, and adding languages just adds more verisimilitude to the setting, and more kind of detail and quote realism unquote. So I might add some like language stuff. Maybe that might be too tedious. Maybe some more random names for the different cultures. I do have that I personally use several, and like I know I have a couple of some lists for like Laurenthian names, Eridorian or / Brythian. Even though it's the same language, their names are actually somewhat different. I use very Arthurian names for the most part for Eridorn, and I use typically more like Anglo-Saxon names for Brythia. So Moldavia, typically, those are pretty obvious. Those are more like Slavic names, Romanian names, Transylvanian names, that sort of thing. Right. Even some Russian names you can kind of throw in there as well. Laurenthian names are very Latin-based. Latin is the older meaning of the word Latin, or Latium, which was the language the Romans spoke. Ancient Greek names are good for Pridonian names. Zarmese names are very Arabic or Arabesque, obviously. Ticonderan names are very, very based on Chinese. But again, these are just templates, ideas of. I've said this in other videos that a lot of the cultures in Savage Kingdoms do mirror real life cultures or past cultures, but they're not them exactly, because if you really look in the gazetteer section of the book, and you'll see that, oh yeah, but all the gods are different. Oh, their imports and exports are different, or oh wow, even their personnel, even some of their sayings are completely different. What I would think Roman people. So yeah, don't make that assumption. But the reason they are based on real life cultures is because it's something called templating. If you know that, oh, I'm a Laurentian, you don't have time to read about it. You just know that, okay, I'm kind of a Romanesque guy, and you'll have about 80% of that correct when you role play. So what else would be in the book? I was going to write a little cheat sheet, a little note thing for me to remember all this stuff, and I thought I had it in my head, and maybe I'm forgetting something. Um, I think that's it, though. I think honestly, that's going to be it. Oh yeah. So there's going to be some new. These are kind of big things. There'll be a couple of new talents, I believe. I know there's some new spells. There's about 3, 4, 5. So if you're getting the theme that this is an adventure supplement, which originally it was and still is, uh, but also a bunch of other cool like random stuff in there, a la like Xanathar's Guide to Everything from Dungeons and Dragons, something like that. Kind of a source book, right, or resource book. Then you're correct. So that's really what it was, and that was always the intent. I think it in the original video. I said that Heroic Adventures will have 4 or 5 big adventures, and there'll probably be some other stuff, appendices of other stuff. Instead of appendices, though, I think I'm going to add more stuff because I think I find that extra stuff fascinating. I think you guys will like most of it as well, if not all of it. So it'll be more than an appendix, probably. It'll be like a whole section. So basically, I'd imagine 2/3 of the book, maybe 3/4 will be, well, let's call it 70% will be adventure material, actual adventure notes, and um, and then the other 30% will be the stuff I just mentioned: languages, encounter tables, optional rules, some new spells. I think there might be a new talent or two. I can't remember. I think there's even a new weakness actually that you can take called monastic. Was that it? Anyway, I don't want to spoil too much, nor do I want to make this video too much longer, but wanted to kind of update everybody what's going on. So yes, I am continuing to work on Heroic Adventures, Savage Kingdoms Heroic Adventures, continue the Savage Kingdoms 3rd edition game line. I'm also kind of working on Red Sun on the side. It's kind of secondary right now as I need to get this Heroic Adventures book out. The last thing I want to cover, though, is kind of based on what I mentioned in the last video that I did, was probably like a month ago. It's been a while. I've been kind of been busy, and honestly got a little burnout on doing the videos. So what I mentioned back then was possibly doing a Kickstarter to raise a little bit more money, because not to go into super detail of the last video, just watch the last video. But I mentioned that we really kind of undercut us, like we barely made enough money, and then now prices have gone up since that time. So printing prices have gone up about 15 to 20%. And I still have to pay my graphic designer. And I want to pay him a fair wage as I've done before. So, and then somehow I have to kind of like survive. I mean, actually, the extra money is fine. I don't need it personally for myself, but I do need to also for shipping. I need to ship all the books out when that's done. So all of that costs. So basically, shipping and printing costs is the main thing that has gone up. Last time I crunched the numbers, like it's gone up another about in total about $1,000, $900 to $1,000 more than it was even just a year ago for printing and shipping. It sounds ridiculous. I didn't think it would be that much, but that's literally what the number was. I say 900, so between 800 and 1,000. So if I do a Kickstarter, that's probably going to be the goal, is 800, 900, maybe even 1,000. I think if I do Indiegogo, I can keep like whatever, even if it's short, which will be a little helpful. But I do kind of like Kickstarter, has a little more appeal and mainstream appeal, and I do kind of like the fact that if you can't meet your target, because that way you need this number, and if you're short, you don't keep it because you'll sell yourself short and you'll run out of money, which is what almost happened in the first place for this original Kickstarter for the Heroic Adventures book. So hopefully it updates everybody. If I do the new Kickstarter, just to I will try to add a new thing so at least people get new stuff for it instead of just kicking in more money to make the original thing happen. I'll let you guys know if I do that Kickstarter. It'll probably be like in the next month or two. Anyway, Thanks for tuning in, guys. Hopefully you stayed to the end, and I will talk to you again soon.